Good evening and welcome back to the shop here in Canterbury, New Hampshire. Glad to have you here. Tonight I want to talk about something that is fundamental to woodworking, and it's not that hard when you get it down, and that is tuning up or adjusting your bandsaw to give you the optimal cut. And I'm going to do that by just changing out the blade and going through the process with you. So stick around if you want to catch all that. Thanks for being here. I'm Tom McLaughlin. This is Epic Woodworking, where together we get to the heart of woodworking. And I'm glad you're here spending some time with me in the shop. If you like this content, go ahead and subscribe and like and share and hit that bell so you'll get constant reminders. Annoying constant reminders. Actually, they're not annoying at all. If you want to see when we do release stuff, please do that and we will be sure you're notified. All right, so tonight I want to tune up my bandsaw, and this goes back, boy, to this book I got. This came out in 1989, and I got it that year, I think, or 1990. And it was Mark Dujinski. You may have heard of him or seen him around. I think he was in Wisconsin or Michigan, but his father was a pattern maker, and he grew up around woodworking, and so he was just, I could tell at these woodworking shows that are still going on, he was a regular there, and that's where I first saw him. And a lot of the time he was there, he was representing Inca, the bandsaws. And I was just blown away with how finely adjusted he had his bandsaw. And he was very quiet, and he would cut these conical shapes, cones, out of thick material. And he was so smooth and steady. It was just amazing how beautiful he worked. Some of you may know of him. So he came out with a book, I think, on adjusting tools, but I think this was his first book. He had kind of an obsession with bandsaws and getting them to operate really well. So this book is great, but I have noticed that when I went to look for this to see how we could link and find it, I think it's out of print because I think I found one on the used market. But the good news is he has a new book, an updated version of this. This is so old, it doesn't even have like the wood miser. It starts out in the early part talking about portable sawmills, but it doesn't even, the wood misers weren't even really out that much then because he didn't even show them. And since then, they've got all these other type of mills. What's the name of that book again?
Complete Guide to Bandsaws?
Yeah, something like that. The new Complete Guide to Bandsaws.
There was a sub-line that was everything you'd want to know about everything.
But we have a link in the description?
Yeah.
All right, there you go. A link in the description for Mark Dujinski's book. It's awesome to have a reference book, and especially if you're new to bandsaws, it helps familiarize you with some of the idiosyncrasies that can go wrong and how to attack them and tune things up. I remember going through this book and tuning up the bandsaw because he was so influential to me that I actually bought the Inca that he was always demonstrating on at the woodworking shows. This is the style that he had, and a lot of you have seen this off in the corner. So this is a 30-year-old saw, and it's a 10-inch Inca. I know I've mentioned this, but I don't think they're made anymore, but they are available on the after market, like used in, Craigslist, whatever. But I'm showing you this not to say Inca's the bandsaw. This is just a bandsaw in that grouping of small bandsaws. The 10, the Delta 14-inch were huge. Then it's the Powermatic and the Jet and the Grizzly, and there's all kinds of 14, 16s that are pretty much the same in the way you want to adjust them when you change out the blade and make sure things are running nicely. Let's go ahead, we'll change out a blade, and we'll talk about some of the questions you guys have already chimed in on our email. Thank you for those. And also, you're welcome to ask any questions here as we go along. But let's start by just talking about where you get your blades. Another link I put in there is for Timberwolf blades. Those are the ones I use. I get asked that often. Sometimes I get asked for my advice, and I'm almost like thinking, why am I the guy for that? But I am. I have, because I mean that in terms of I haven't had 10 different brands of bandsaw blades in front of me and done exhaustive tests so that I could tell you, oh, well, you want to use that one. But I have, like you are asked around in the past for people, hey, what do you think? What's good? What's good out there? And I can't remember how I stumbled on them, but you can go to the Suffolk Machinery, do a search for Suffolk Machinery bandsaw blades, and they will have Timberwolf blades and link you through there. Or you can go, I think it's right to the timberwolfblades.com. We have a link in the description for that as well. They're nice bandsaw blades. They're fairly inexpensive for the quality that you get. And when you buy them, they come wrapped in paper like this. And my oddball Inca 10-inch has a 73.5-inch blade. So you don't see that all the time. It's hard to buy in the standard ones because the standard ones are made for the deltas and all that. But here's the Timberwolf logo there. And this came through Suffolk Machinery Corp. But yeah, there it is. It's timberwolfblades.com. All right. So what I've got here are for the Inca, and these are they're 3/8 with 6 teeth per inch. So one nice thing on their website is it will help you select the size of blade you want. If you look, when you get to the page where it lists all the blades and the different widths, it starts out, I think they start at 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, and go right on up. On this, just over to the right, there's a column that talks about what these particular blades are good for cutting. Hardwood, softwood. Then it gives you a range of thicknesses they're most effective at. So this 3/8, 6 teeth per inch, if I remember this right, it's for hardwoods and softwoods, but the hardwoods can be for roughly, anywhere between 1/2 to 2.5 inches thick. And a lot of that also depends on what your feed rate is. The thicker the material, the more dust or bulk of dust you're pulling through the cut, and that gets removed by the size of the gullet in the teeth. So I'm not going to go all into I'm not going to nerd out on bandsaw blades tonight, unless I get a question, then I might have to. But the gullets are basically, they hook and they cut, and they're removing the dust as you move through. So you can you'll get a feeling for it, like not to push too heavy. You'll feel the resistance, and you've got to push fast enough to let it clear, to allow for the clearance, or slow enough, and to get a smoother cut. So it's always nice to put on a fresh blade, because usually you've been struggling with something you has been dull, not cutting well, and you haven't adjusted your guides for a while. And the guides always seem to get a little wonky after a while. So it gives you an opportunity to reset things up when you put on your new blade. Now, when this was my only bandsaw for those early years, I used to buy the 1/2-inch blades, 3 teeth per inch, for when I was going to saw heavier material. I could even resaw some decent heights with this small bandsaw with a slow feed rate, and sometimes cheating by making preliminary saw cuts on my table saw, and then I'd only have to remove that little middle bridge portion. So I'd have that, and then I would have 1/4-inch ones for making radius cuts, and sometimes 3/8. And watching Mark Dujinski, that 1/8-inch blade, it was unbelievable. But so I've tried that too. I've gone the 1/8-inch blade, but the thing about the small blades is because it's not a massive metal, they actually get hotter because it doesn't have the body of the blade to dissipate the heat from the teeth. But those 1/8-inch blades, they were fun to cut with, but very delicate, to set up. And they didn't last long. Like, you'd have to tension them enough. But you can imagine an 1/8-inch blade can break fairly easily. And you have to move slowly through. They can cut beautifully, don't get me wrong. But for me, it's almost never a need. So I was using 1/4-inch for a while and 1/2-inch. But then when I got a big saw, I've had a big saw for a while now, I would usually keep the 1/2-inch 3-tooth or a 3/4-inch 3-tooth on there for the bigger resawing. And that was dedicated. So I no longer needed a 1/2-inch here, and I really didn't use the small radiuses either. So I settled on 3/8, 6 teeth per inch, because the more teeth you have, the smoother the cut. But also the slower you kind of have to go. This gives you a pretty nice smooth cut on a small bandsaw. I could go 4, 4 or 6, but I kind of like the 6 because I've got the rougher 3-tooth on the other saw. Now, it could be a 1/4-inch or 3/8, but when you go to the 3/8, you lose a little of the radius cut. Like, this will cut very smoothly around 1.25 inch radius, where the 1/4-inch will get under an inch, almost under an inch radius, maybe even 3/4. So it has that little versatility. I'm not often cutting corners that hard in furniture making, and if I am, I'll do some preliminary curve cuts. But you have to decide, do you want to use that or that? When you use a thinner blade, though, you have that heat factor. They don't last as long, and they flex. Let me open this up. The blade, when you're cutting with it, it can deflect side to side like that, but that's where the guides are there to help you. But it also can deflect this way. But when you get up to 3/8 of an inch, it gets to be more firm and rigid. So you don't get the flex as much, and they last longer, and you get the smooth cut and a pretty decent cutting radius. That's why I use the 6 teeth per inch. So, but if you prefer the smaller, you can go with the 4. This is, some people always ask me, why do you have a left-hand bandsaw? I never know whether to call this a left or right. But if it's open on the left side, it's considered a left hand. If it's open on the right side, like this one, it's considered a right hand. And it's just like if the slot for your crosscut sled or whatever is on the left side, then you're imagining it's a left-handed cut. It honestly doesn't matter to me. I feel like I'm amphibious. I can go either way with it. So anyway, like a lot of you, right? One time I was at Pug Shop, and I've mentioned this before. He had a lot of the older guys in the neighborhood. They revered him in a way, and they were mostly retired. Yeah, they were pretty much all retired. And they were doing various things. They had shops in their home. But to go into a Pug Shop and to see what Mr. Moore was doing and just ask him some questions, you could tell they were really honored in a way to do that, and he was friendly, so he befriended them as well, so it was really nice. And they'd stay for a little bit and then go on their way. Well, there was this one guy who was kind of cantankerous, and he lived across the street. The town moved out west, and Pug was in the suburbs, but next door to him, 2 buildings, was a Taco Bell, and then there was a McDonald's. On the other side, there was a Pizza Hut. It was weird, like right on Sunset Ave. And after his house got torn down after he sold it, if you go to Rocky Mount, North Carolina on Sunset Ave at 2800 Sunset Ave, Google that. You're going to see a Sonic burger. It's kind of sad, but it did happen in his lifetime after he left, so he did want to, and he did go down and get himself a Sonic burger. But anyway, this guy, I'm trying to think of his name, he lived across the street from the McDonald's. And, he used to sit in his front window, but he did do woodworking. And, he was just kind of mad at stuff all the time. It seemed like when he came over, right? And one time he came over, and he had his bandsaw, and he said, Bug, he goes, I don't know what to do. They sent me the wrong bandsaw. I need the teeth going the other way. Like, see, my teeth are coming down this way, and his were going up the other way. So Pug goes, oh, let me see that. And he takes it, and he just turns it like this. And he goes, there you go. Now the teeth are going up. I was like, what the heck? I didn't know bandsaws were like that, but that is it. So if you get your bandsaws and you're kind of confused like that, it can happen. No biggie. You just flip your bandsaw blade inside out. All right.
Do we need that in slow motion?
What?
Do we need to show that in slow motion, what you just did?
I'm just twisting it inside out, okay. Like that. So it's just flipping it. Yeah. Okay. And that'll turn it around. So there it is. Now I should note, when you get the bandsaw, they're custom weld to length. So if you have a funky old one, like that has an unusual length, like I had that big old bandsaw, I could get, I think it was like 217 inches or something. They'll cut it exactly to what you want and weld it there. And this place, Timberwolf has really nice welding. So you'll notice, like on this blade, you can see right there, that's the weld point. Usually when the blades break, they'll break along that weld point. But you want them to be smooth, and they will track pretty nicely. All right, so let's take the cover off. I'm going to take off my little fence. And most of the parts of this are the same as most. However, the guides vary quite a bit across different bandsaws. Like this one has these old, what they call cool blocks. I think they're like a hard graphite material, where the Felder I have there has ceramic blocks, which you've seen spark a little bit here and there, but they're really nice too. They run kind of cool. But some bandsaws, like my big old one, had actual roller bearings that we had fitted it out with. So let me get this out of the way. My little guide in the front. And now the blade is free to come out. Okay, so this little handle is going to loosen. My upper wheel is going to start coming down. Then you can see I'm getting looseness there. I'm going to take it out. So you just take it out and slide it right out that slot. Now to put it away, you don't want to have it around like this. You put your right hand under and your left hand over. If you stand behind me, I want to fold this into a smaller circle. And then I'm going to push my left hand down and my right hand up. And then see that loop away from me? I want that to kind of wrap up and under like that. So you end up with a small little circle like they came, and you can tie it up. So I'll do that one more time. Normally I just go like that. So if you just practice that, it's kind of fun. When you have the long ones, you have to do that twice. You do that once, and then I have my foot on it, and I do it again up in the air. So you end up actually with 6 loops, but it's the same move, just twice. What I'm going to do is loosen up the guide. So these are my cool blocks. Not because they're cool, but because they're not supposed to run hot, right? So I'm going to loosen. You know what? This used to have a flathead screw, but I forget what happened. I think I don't even know what happened, but now I've got 2 different Allen wrench sizes for these. And so I'm going to back this one away and just snug it up away, and then I'll pull this one back too. All right, so nothing's touching there. And then I'm going to go and get a screwdriver and do the same underneath. So these guides are up here, and they're the top guide, and this is what adjusts up and down. Okay. So that's my top guide, and there's my bottom guide down here. I can see that bearing is almost gone. But so then I'm going to loosen my guides under here as well and open that up a little bit. This one actually is supposed to go with your fingers, but it's not easy to get your fingers in there, so I use the screwdriver. All right, there, you see that? So it's wide open right now, okay? So with it open, I always like to open them up again, especially, you might say, why are you doing that? You already had them close. Well, they weren't actually close. There was too much play on them. And also, you want to start by setting the tension and the tracking of the blade first, so you know it's cruising in a nice balanced way. Then you bring your guides up to it, so that the guides are not messing with the tension or anything like that. All right, so there it is. A new blade right here. Bring it in, go over the top. And yeah, sort of like this. All right, so once you get it on there, then you can start to snug it up a little bit. Now, position on the wheels, that varies too. So I'm going to just start getting it snug. This wheel, I should have showed you while the band was off. These rubber tires on the wheel are actually slightly radiused. So some bandsaws have radiused wheels or tires, and others are flat. So most of the bigger, heavier saws are flat, like this Felder. I don't know how many are made radius now. If you guys know what the smaller bandsaws are, if they come radiused or flat, I'd be interested to know. So when they're radiused, the blade wants to ride up in the center. And that's usually the position that you want a smaller blade. You don't want it out to the front or the back. You want it to be balanced and riding over the crown of a radius blade. Now the same goes for flat blades. Like, you really need to, there's some discussion, I don't know if disagreement, about where blades should track on the wheel, where you should get them riding here. Should they be in the middle, or should you let the teeth overhang the front of the rubber tire? That's what some advise. Now, on a smaller saw like this, with a radiused or crowned rubber tire, it's recommended to ride in the middle. With a big flat one like this, actually, it's a good idea to look at your manual when all else fails, right? Where did I put that thing? Well, I had never actually looked at the manual. Maybe I did with the Felder. And it says on the Felder, any blade size from 6 to 16 millimeters right in that range, it's good to ride them in the center of your tire. But as you get wider than that, which is really when you're getting over 3/4 of an inch, remember? An eighth, yeah. So when you're getting over 5/8 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, then they recommend you move it forward so the teeth overhang the front of the rubber wheel. The reasoning being that this has a wider tire, and you want to have some of the mass of the blade, at least 1/4 of an inch or so, over the backside, over the center line, toward the other side, so that it's riding somewhat on more of the tire, and you're just putting the teeth hanging over the edge on the wider blades. And that's the way it is for this Felder. Now, if you can get it to ride and be smooth and cut beautifully for you with a smaller blade with the teeth hanging over the front, fine, go for it. I don't know, but I have the radius one, and I don't have a small saw with a flat tire to tell you. Now I want to get it tracking. I'm tracking a little bit back up here, but I'm right in the middle on the lower. I'm slightly toward the back on the upper. I'm kind of okay with that. It looks pretty nice down there. Let's see. Yeah, I'm fine. It's been running well for me. I'm in the center here. Now, if you get in Mark Dujinski's book and you start getting carried away in that, he talks about aligning, making sure your wheels are aligned and your tires are good and fresh. And I've even actually changed these tires and put new ones on. That's why the adhesive is messy. But that was a while back. I can't even remember. So what the heck? I'll just see if I can get this, what happens. So now I have a little dial in the back. You're probably going to find it in the back of your saw to change the pitch of your upper wheel, to change how the band is riding on your wheel. So just by turning it by hand, I can see I'm going counterclockwise, and that's starting to track in the middle. And on the bottom, I'm going a little toward the front, which is okay. So this little double, that feels pretty good. All right, so now I'm going to lock it in there. And the tension, though, what are we going to do about this? So I'm getting a little, don't worry about it wobbling here. There's a little bit of a bump. Maybe there is a little kink in it. Sometimes if you get a bad weld, you'll have a kink like so. I've got a little bump right here. Maybe this is from all my smooth demonstrating of flipping it around. I'm going to try to just push my thumb in where it's bumped. All right? That looks pretty smooth now. Okay. So I'm not sure about the tension, but I got enough there. Now, a lot of saws now come with tension guides. They'll have a little arrow pointer, and you tighten it up until it hits the zone. You don't want to over tighten though. You do want to tighten the big saws when you need to resaw, like the bigger blades. Those are surprisingly tight. So when you're going to resaw, you need the solid tension. This has a good tensioner on it. I can't believe how I'm cranking it when I got a 3/4 inch blade in there. And you get that in there, and the guide's set right, and I mean that thing will track dead on and cut straight as an arrow. With the smallest saws, you want your blades to last. So if you over tighten, you're not going to last as long with that too tensioned. So I want to get just enough. Now, in Dujinski's book, he talks about putting moderate pressure on the side, and if you can move it about 1/4 of an inch with moderate pressure. Now, what's moderate pressure? Maybe to you, it's a lot. So I'm just pushing it, and I don't know. That's hard to tell, right? So here's another method I use, and this is totally up to you if you want to use this method. Please take absolute precaution if you do this.
Oh, goodness. What are you recommending?
I was afraid you were going to say get nervous.
Disclaimers on this.
I am. Don't try this at home, all right? So anyway, I've got it tracking. It's a new blade. It's on there good. And I've got moderate tension on there.
Sharp.
So I'm going to turn it on. What I'm going to watch for is the vibration in the band. So if you want to put the absolute minimum pressure on there to get it riding right, it's almost like a harmonic vibration that most blades have. And if you loosen it up to just the point, I'll actually loosen it back if it's not vibrating until we see it start to go. It'll start to get fuzzy, like right there. And then I'm going to tighten up just till I see it get straight, and then I'll do just like a little bit more. Okay? Then you know you've got the minimum amount of tension on that blade, and you're not going to hurt that blade. It's going to be tracking fine. Okay? So let's go ahead and do this. All right, so it's already moving. It's vibrating. I'm going to tighten up. Okay, I was seeing this vibrating, it was cloudy, and then I just snugged it up until it was no longer. So now I know I'm tracking really nice. I've got no guides up to it, and so I want to bring the guides up now, okay? So I'm going to tighten this thing, make sure it's aligned, and what Dujinski says is to use a dollar bill, since I don't usually have any money in my pockets. I don't actually ever see money. I am going to use a piece of paper which is the same. It's 4/1000 of an inch. And then you can bring that up to it. Now, heck with that. I don't really use that. What I do is I'll bring the cool block up until I'm just very lightly touching it. I mean, 4/1000 is hard to see.
Let me see what I should be showing you, hon.
You can come right in here at the cool blocks. So watch this cool block. I think it's straight on so you can see it. Okay. So it's going to come up until it just touches, but I don't want to deflect the blade like that. It's already tracking beautifully right in line there. So this is right where I want to snug it up. Just so this is touching. Okay. And then I'm going to bring the other one in and do the same. I'll bring it right on down. Now, I could put the piece of paper in for this one because it's easier. The first one, I don't really want to use the paper. I want to just see that it's just lightly touching. And then I'm going to snug this one up. Okay, so I've got free movement, but I'm so close that it's going to act as a really nice guide. See how this is moving freely, but I can barely move that. The other thing you want to do is move the assembly forward or back. Now that it's tracking where you want on the tire, you want that cool block just behind the gullets, not too close, but see where that is? Can you see that is? It's right behind the gullets, but not at them. That's a good position. So I'm going to lock it in right there. Now this assembly is pretty rigid. Now I'm going to bring this up till it's just touching the blade right there. Just about. If you want to see, you actually want to see a 4/1000 of an inch there. And then I'm going to bring this down, my dollar bill. So if I bring it down until it's just snug, that's good. I usually don't use the paper. I just can feel it. So now it's moving, okay? And it's nice. It's going to be well guided. Now the last thing you have to do on this assembly is adjust the thrust bearing, and that's this bearing right here. And that's behind the blade. That's so that when you put pressure, you're not pushing the blade back too far. So it's like when you're pushing in or applying thrust to the front of the blade, it's going to back it up. So you want that to be, well, he says 16 thousandths, like 4 layers, or a 64th of an inch is good. I'm just going to eyeball that right here. What? So I'm just going to come forward and then back off just a 64th. Just seeing it. Okay? So just with a little pressure, it'll hit that thrust bearing and keep it from going back. Now I'll do the same in the front. I just have to cut in front of a camera lady. And with these down below, I'll do the same thing, except I'm going to move them up. I'm looking down through the opening here. I'm moving the cool block. So I've got another guide assembly below the table. So that's what keeps it aligned beautifully. So I'm doing the exact same thing I just did. I moved that first block up. Now I'm moving the second one in till I'm just barely touching my cool blocks. I like to back up a little bit when I come in. There it is. There it is. Did I say there it is?
So it is.
There it is, everybody. And then now I got to move that thrust bearing forward on this one. And I'm just going to bring it up. Just touch the blade.
Yeah, it's too dark. Sorry, gang.
No, that's okay. I think they get the picture. It's the same as up here.
Okay.
Okay, so there it is. Both thrust bearings are hitting. The guides are just up. So that blade is beautifully guided right in there, okay? So now I just want you to know something. I've got no dust in there. I vacuumed it out. I'm going to show you a little technique that creates sparks, and you don't want a lot of dust in there to do this. So I'm going to put on the cover. The tightening knobs used to be part of the cover, but now they're not, and there's only 2 of them. But that's okay. It's still working good. All right, so then I snug these down. I get the throat plate back in. Whoops, turn it this way. This is my homemade one because I've gone through a few. And I can tighten in the little crosscut bar. And that's that. Now, one thing that is recommended that's in that book that I usually try to remember to do is if you can slightly round the back of the blade. Also, during the weld, sometimes you get a little imperfection and you hear a little tick, 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 tick hitting your thrust bearing there. And that's going to wear it out, like the one I have down there. So you want to slightly radius that. So I've got just a little diamond stone. You could use an oil stone or anything. And I'm going to just turn this on and very slightly hit the corners. This will create a little bit of spark. Well, not much spark actually. All right, so that does feel more rounded. I wasn't getting many sparks off that, but that is a diamond stone. I usually use you can use an oil stone too, it works nice. But anyway, what that does is it puts a lot more, it won't scratch up the thrust bearing, and it also helps when you're making tighter radius saw cuts because that back edge of the blade is now softened and radius, so it's going to be bearing against what you've just cut. If you had a little jog in the cut, it won't get hung up, it'll more smoothly move over, because whatever happens in the back of the blade is going to affect the front in a little way. All right? So, believe it or not, that's it. Now I've got it set up. Of course, you want to make sure your table is square, and I would just use a square here and adjust up and down. But that's it for the main guide system. Let's make a test cut. I've got a block here. Look at this. This is 3-inch block, and this is 1.5 inches. So, and then I've got 3/4. So let's just do a couple cuts. We'll turn on the air. Now, normal procedure to get the best guidance while you're cutting is to lower the post so that it's just off the workpiece. I usually am I have to come up almost a 1/2 inch so I can see there. And that's nice. That's plenty. You can try to get it closer, but if it's inhibiting your seeing it, that's kind of important. So there, I got the dust on. We'll start with this one. Yeah. Pretty smooth. Now I'm gonna go with the thicker one. And lastly, I gotta let this stop because I'm Mr. Safety. Bring it up. And tighten it down. There we go. That's really smooth for... So there, that's a pretty smooth cut. That's going through 3-inch maple. I think it's soft maple, but it's still pretty hard and pretty thick. So on that, I wanted to travel a little slower so the blade wouldn't heat up. It feels very lightly warm right now. That's enough on that. I've just referenced the Felder. It's a very similar process, except you've got the ceramic guides and the ceramic thrust bearing, or it's actually not a bearing at all. It's just it's another piece of ceramic in behind there. And then it has the tensioner in that window, which I tighten with this, and it's incredible. So 2 different bandsaws for 2 different purposes, smaller, lighter, tighter curves. You can do some pretty precise work here, and then a lot of resawing, but smooth curves over here as well. All right, well, we end another night. What a good time. Remember to subscribe right here. If you like this content, you want to be kept up with all the goings on here, we'd love you to subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified every time we put up some new content. Thanks for being here. We look forward to seeing you next time, right back here on Shop Night Live. Good night, everybody.
Night, friends.